Okay, I've got the bit installed here, and a word quickly about the tool that's going to be spinning it. There's two kinds of these guys. One of them is kind of like a dental tool, and when you push on the pedal, they rev up to like 20,000 RPM or whatever it is. They're the ones that make a whine, and they have very low torque. And that's in fact what we're going to use for the little spinny brush thing that I showed you earlier. When we get to the brushes, we'll be using one of those high-speed ones. This guy, however, turns very slowly and by design, and you can put a lot of pressure on it and it'll continue to cut. And this gives you excellent control and is what I recommend to do this kind of task. If you use one of the high speed ones on this step, it will try to run away with you and be very difficult to control. I'm sure there's somebody in the world that can do it, but it's kind of like making life hard for yourself if you choose to do it that way. A steep learning curve. So here we go. I'm going to make some general motions here that are going to break up the flatness of the rim of this pipe. And the main trick is to randomize your own angles and motions and so forth so that no pattern appears that is obvious to somebody looking at it, that, oh yeah, the guy took a such and such tool and ran it around the edge. You can see how it's a repeating mark. You don't want a repetition here. So vary the angle and the pressure and whatnot enough to kind of, well, you want to break it up in a natural way. Okay. I'm using quite a lot more pressure than you would guess if you were just making a guess. You'd say, no, you want to kind of be gentle, and no, you really have to get after this. Briar is pretty hard stuff, and you want a fine tooth or fairly fine tooth blade on the end of it, or burr, so that it doesn't grab and run with you like a car tire trying to get traction and go. And to get much result from a fairly smooth tool like this, you got to use a lot of pressure. Okay, I think that's about it. Yeah, that'll work. And so I'm going to switch to one of the medium-sized one. Well, it's actually still pretty small, but in the scheme of things, it's more middle-sized, and then we'll move on to the little tiny ones at the end. Remember, keep changing the angle of attack. In every axis. You don't want a repeating pattern, or it'll be obvious to anybody from halfway across the room. what you tried to do. For what it's worth, the tendency is to make it too uniform. Humans tend to think that randomness is less random than it actually is. Okay. I think we're about to where we want to be with that tip, so we'll move on to these little sharp guys. Okay, almost. And the final tip is an itty bitty one. It's like a needle almost, with a little pine cone thing underneath it. Okay. Now we're going to switch hand pieces and go to one of these brushes. And you need to have a reversible brush. If this thing goes clockwise, it's going to shoot the dust it creates. The particle matter is going to go right in your face, eyes, up your nose. It's horrible. You want a reversible motor that'll spin counterclockwise. That's if you're right-handed. And it will shoot the dust away from you. Now I'm only going to do this for a minute to illustrate it, because I do run the dust collector when I do this one. The room fills up with briar powder otherwise, but give you an idea of what's going on with it. Okay. And I might go back after, I'll shut the camera off. There's a couple of spots I think that I can improve the randomness just a little bit, but that should give you some idea of what we're talking about. Also, I'm going to be doing exactly the same thing to the end of the shank, not quite so deep maybe, but close to it. And in order to do that without risking jacking up the face of this with a big notch or something, we've still got the old stem and it fits as well as it ever did. I didn't grind on the shank to level it. So we now have this thing will, it doesn't matter if we gouge this up a little bit, so we can doctor this area in here with the same tips that I just used on the rim, and it won't matter if we take some nicks out of the rubber. We'll just swap out for the new stem when we're done. So I will finish this up, move on to this one. I won't be videoing that because it's all the same thing. And then we'll have one more to go when we actually color the stummel and finish it out for good. So that's it. Back in a minute.